Hi guys, in this video I'll be sharing a story on the first time I've ever used affirming to physically manifest something. So originally when had used this technique, I actually didn't even know that I was doing robotic affirming, and I also just wasn't fully aware of what I was doing. I just knew that I was doing it just to potentially receive a good outcome. So, what happened was I was 28 weeks pregnant with my son. And around that time, I was doing a lot of heavy lifting because we were in the process of moving. And actually, we had just moved. So, I was doing a lot of heavy lifting, like lifting couches, painting, like painting the house and things like that. And I was just really active. So around 19 weeks, when I was like 19 weeks pregnant, I was already starting to have contractions, but I didn't pay them much attention simply because I'm like, oh, maybe it's normal. So 28 weeks came, and I had just gotten out the shower. Now, around that time, my stomach was already like super huge, so I wasn't taking baths anymore. So I got out the shower and I was like getting myself together, and I had noticed that every time I would bend over, like liquid or fluid was dripping out of me. So at first, I was like trying to process what was happening. And I'm like, I haven't been taking baths. And that whole week, I was not sexually active. So there was no reason for what was happening. So I'm like, oh, I think my water broke. So at that time, like, it wasn't like a lot of fluid, but it was like leaking out. So I had ended up going to the emergency room. And during that process, like around that time, I was listening to Abraham Hicks a lot. So the one thing that came to my mind is when she would talk about like going on a rampage of just thinking and saying positive things. So that whole time, I was just like repeating positive things to myself as far as like my baby being healthy and okay and things like that. Because like I didn't necessarily know if I was gonna have to give birth early. I just knew that I needed my baby to be healthy, and I was affirming, that everything would work out and things like that. So as I was continuously affirming these positive things throughout that process, so this girl who was like the transporter, she was like some sort of like student. Like, I don't know if she was just like an intern, I believe she might have been, but I ended up talking to her because she had transported me up to the floor that I was going to be on to be monitored. And as we were talking, like, I had recently watched this documentary it was about giving birth. It was called The Business of Being Born. It was like this documentary on Netflix. And there was a lot of good information in there. But anyway, as we were talking, she ended up bringing up that documentary. So it was like a synchronicity. Like, we started talking about that. And when I finally had got up to the room where I was going to be monitored at, they were monitoring me and everything seemed to be fine. Although, like, as you know, like, there was fluid coming out of me slowly. However, although my underwear were actually wet, and after that, like after I was like monitored for a while, and they had determined that I wasn't, like everything seemed to be normal, and like my fluid levels were normal, after that, like, there was no more leaking. And I honestly believe that from that affirming, I had just manifested myself into a timeline where that water break did not occur. And I say that because there was no logical reason for me to be leaking, right? And for it to just randomly stop out of nowhere, like, I honestly, looking back at it, I believe that I just simply entered into a new timeline where it never happened. However, back then, I couldn't really grasp it mentally. Like, I knew what I had experienced, and I had went through all of the logics of what it could have been, but logically, like, there was no explanation for it. It was just one of those things where I was just grateful that everything was okay. My baby was fine. I was still able to carry my baby to full term, and I was really grateful too that I was able to work up until I had given birth to my baby. So that's the end of my story. Thank you so much for watching, and have a beautiful day.